Hey everyone, welcome to this tutorial on the Eccella Mapping Cleanup Tool version 2. In this video, we are going to take a look at how to install and use the Eccella Mapping Cleanup Tool. Well, before we get into that, let's first talk a bit on the purpose of this tool. We all know that for development in Informatica PowerCenter, Velocity has set down certain naming standards for the names of each type of objects, like mappings, transformations and ports, workflows and tasks. But while developing mappings in PowerCenter, we often tend to ignore these naming standards. So later, during code review, we end up spending a lot of time and effort in manually standardizing these names. And even then, it leaves some scope for human errors and has an impact on the project deadlines. To minimize this effort of manually reviewing and updating the mappings, tasks and workflows, we came up with this tool which can actually do these standardizations in the code automatically. And not only naming standards, this tool is capable of checking and cleaning up a couple of other non-standard practices as well, which we'll soon get into. Now talking about the Eccella Mapping Cleanup Tool, it has been developed using Informatica B2B data transformation. It has a very clean and simple UI. It takes an XML input and gives an XML output. The XML input is the exported XML of mappings from PowerCenter, and the XML output can be directly imported back into PowerCenter. Please note, before you install this tool, please keep the license key file which you have received from us when you purchase the tool ready. The license key file is named Eccella Mapping Cleanup Tool.key, and as you can see, I have placed it in my desktop. Now let's go ahead and install the tool. Let me remind you, as a prerequisite, please make sure you already have the following: Informatica B2B data transformation installed on your local machine. You have access to some folder in the system with administrative privileges in it. Now let's go ahead and run the installer. Yes to that. Next. I'll leave it to that. Next. I'll also leave the installation directory as it is and click next, 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 and finally next to install. Now we have successfully installed the tool in our local system. Clicking finish will run the tool since we have this checked. We can also run the tool from the desktop shortcut created or the start menu program shortcut created during the installation. Let's go ahead and click finish. During the first run, we are supposed to update the licensing information in the tool. Click OK to update the licensing information for your installation. Remember the license key file you received from us? Select that file to update the licensing information for this installation. Mind you, please do not change the name or contents of this licensing key file. That will cause the tool to error out before it runs. This is the UI through which you can use the tool. It has three main tabs. One, to review the source XML for possible changes. One, to run the tool and clean up the source XML. One, to edit the default naming standards, and the last one is help. Now let's talk about the third tab first. Now if you remember, we talked about industry-wide accepted naming standards like the velocity standards. By default, the tool follows the velocity standards while cleaning up the mappings. But if your organization has a different naming standard or naming convention that you guys follow, then you can inculcate those into this tool very easily. All you have to do is click this edit button here, and the directory containing the velocity standards XML file will open up. Then you can edit this file using any text editor and update as required. Please follow these guidelines strictly while updating the velocity standards.xml file so that the tool may perform as expected. Alright, now that we have our standards in place, let's go back to the first tab. We have two selections to make. The first one is the path to the source XML file that has been exported from PowerCenter. This is a file that the tool will review and clean up. So let's go ahead and take export of a couple of workflows from the repository manager. For the purpose of this demo, I have created two mappings and workflows where I have conveniently not followed standard naming conventions. Let's go ahead and export them. Note, it is always advisable to export objects from the repository manager, so all the child objects are also included in the export. Also, from the repository manager, we can export multiple objects together into one XML, like I just did. Mind you, the tool is capable of cleaning up multiple mappings and workflows in one run, so you can have all the mappings or workflows in your folder exported into one XML and clean all of them up in just one run. Also, make sure that you're exporting from a non-shared folder, since the tool does not update shared objects. Well, now that we have exported the mappings, let's go ahead and select the source XML. The second selection is a path to the output directory. This is the directory where the tool will create the output XML and the HTML reports. Let's go ahead and select the output directory. If you have noticed these checkboxes here, they are pretty self-explanatory. If you check this one, the output directory will open after a successful run, and if you check this one, the summary dashboard report will open in your browser after a successful run. Let's keep this checked. Now if you notice, you have the option to review the source XML for possible cleanups, or you may skip review. It is advisable to do the review before you clean up the source XML so that you are aware of the possible changes. If you are not comfortable with any of the possible changes you see after the review, you may deselect that rule before you run the cleanup. So let's click review. Notice the tool is now running and reviewing the source XML for possible cleanups. After a successful run, you will get this pop-up saying it reviewed the source XML successfully. Click OK. The review summary dashboard will open up. This page has links to all the other reports generated. As you can see, the tool is capable of checking for 10 different rules. You may hover your mouse over each rule for its description. For example, you want to see the possible workflows and the task name updates. Then we'll click here and you'll see the list of all the possible workflow or task name updates. You want to see the possible mapping name updates or the transformation name updates or the transformation port name updates. Say for example you want to see the transformations without standard port ordering in it. So like this, you can actually go into each and every report and look into the possible changes that can be done. Now let's say you're comfortable with the possible changes in rule 1 and rule 2. So let's close the dashboard. Note, after a successful review, the tool switches to the second tab automatically. Here you can select or deselect the rules that you want to be applied while the tool cleans up the source XML. You can hover over each rule for its description. Let's check this one so that the output directory opens after a successful run, and this was already checked. Now if you remember, we were comfortable with rule 1 and rule 2. So let's keep these two checked and click run. It gives us a warning because the reports from the previous run will be deleted. Click OK. Note the tool is now running and cleaning up the source XML in the background. After a successful run, you will get this pop-up saying it cleaned up the source XML successfully. Click OK. This is the cleanup summary dashboard. Since we only selected rule 1 and rule 2, the rest of the rules are grayed out. Click here to see the list of task name updates. These are what the task names were, and these are what they have been changed to. Click here to see the mapping name updates. These are what the mapping names were, and these are what they have been changed to. Click here for the transformation port updates. these were the transformation old names and these are the transformation new names. As you can see, all of these names have been standardized. Similarly for the port names, and the list of transformations without standard port ordering, and for these transformations the port ordering has been standardized in the source XML. And this is the output directory. These are the HTML reports we just saw, and this is the cleaned up XML which you can directly import back into PowerCenter. So let's go ahead and import this into PowerCenter. Select the cleaned up XML. We'll add the workflows. As you can see, it has successfully imported the workflows back into PowerCenter. This brings us to the end of the video. If you have any doubts at all, do not hesitate to contact us at our website. Hope this video has been helpful. Do leave your feedback and thanks for watching.